Hollywood has always been a place where dreams soar to dazzling heights, but also where nightmares come crashing down. Beneath the glitz, glamour, and flashing cameras lies a darker reality. Fame often comes with a deadly price. For decades, drugs have haunted Tinseltown, turning icons into tragedies and leaving a trail of shattered careers and broken lives. From Marilyn Monroe to Heath Ledger, stars who once lit up the silver screen were slowly consumed by their demons. This isn't just a list of the fallen, it's a chilling reminder that Judy Garland, the unforgettable star of The Wizard of Oz, lived a life that was far from the magical world audiences adored on screen. From a very young age, she was pressured by ruthless studio executives who demanded perfection. To keep her working long hours and to maintain a slim figure, she was handed pills, stimulants to keep her awake and diet pills to suppress her appetite. At night, she was given sleeping tablets to force her to rest. What began as studio control soon turned into a devastating dependency. Garland grew up in a cycle of exhaustion and addiction, her natural childhood stolen by Hollywood's demands. As she aged, the struggle only deepened. She turned to drugs and alcohol to numb the pain of fame, broken marriages, and relentless pressure. Tragically, in 1969, Judy Garland was found dead at just 47, a victim of the very system that made her a star. Marilyn Monroe was the ultimate Hollywood icon, an actress, model, and singer who defined beauty and glamour for an entire generation. Yet, behind her radiant smile and legendary status, Monroe lived a life of loneliness, insecurity, and overwhelming pressure. The studios demanded perfection, while the media painted her as a flawless goddess. In reality, she struggled with crippling anxiety, failed marriages, and the burden of fame. To cope, Marilyn turned to barbiturates, sleeping pills, and alcohol, relying on them to get through sleepless nights and exhausting days. Friends and colleagues often described her as fragile, masking her pain with charm and laughter. On August 5, 1962, the world was shocked when she was found dead at just 36 years old. Officially ruled a probable suicide, her death remained surrounded by mystery and conspiracy. What is certain, however, is that Monroe's addiction played a tragic role in silencing one of Hollywood's brightest stars. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was more than just a musician, he was a cultural revolution. With his electrifying performances, soulful voice, and undeniable charisma, Elvis captured the hearts of millions. But behind the glittering stage lights, he was fighting a dangerous battle. Fame came with constant pressure, and Elvis turned to prescription drugs to keep up with the demands of his career. Painkillers, sedatives, and stimulants became part of his daily routine, creating a deadly dependence. His health began to suffer, and the vibrant energy that once defined him slowly faded. On August 16, 1977, Elvis was found unresponsive in the bathroom of his Graceland mansion. He was only 42 years old. The official cause was cardiac arrhythmia, but the truth was clear: years of prescription drug abuse had taken their toll. Elvis's untimely death remains one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking tragedies. Montgomery Clift was once hailed as one of the most gifted and magnetic actors of his generation. With unforgettable performances in classics like A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity, he was considered a rival to even Marlon Brando. But Clift's life took a devastating turn in 1956 after a near-fatal car crash outside Elizabeth Taylor's home. The accident left his face disfigured and his body in chronic pain, forcing him into a world of prescription painkillers, sedatives, and eventually alcohol. While he continued to work, his once unshakable confidence and striking looks began to fade. The industry labeled him difficult, as addiction and emotional struggles consumed his career. Friends often described his final years as the slowest suicide in Hollywood history. In 1966, at just 45, Montgomery Clift died of a heart attack, his brilliance dimmed by years of dependency and inner torment. Bela Lugosi, forever remembered as the haunting star of Dracula, 1931, brought Gothic horror to life and became a cinematic legend. Yet off-screen, his reality was far darker than the monsters he portrayed. After years of typecasting in horror roles and struggling to find meaningful work, Lugosi began suffering from chronic pain caused by sciatica. To cope, he turned to morphine and later methadone, slipping into a devastating addiction. Unlike many stars of his time, Lugosi's struggle was brutally public. In 1955, he shocked Hollywood by checking himself into a state hospital, openly admitting his dependency on drugs. This rare act of honesty made him one of the first major actors to publicly acknowledge addiction, breaking Hollywood's culture of secrecy. Though he made a small comeback with low-budget films, his health and career never fully recovered. Bela Lugosi died in 1956 at age 73, remembered both as Dracula and as one of Hollywood's earliest cautionary tales. Errol Flynn was the golden boy of Hollywood's golden age, famous for his swashbuckling roles in classics like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. With his charm, good looks, and adventurous spirit, he became a global heartthrob. But Flynn's private life was far from the heroic image he portrayed on screen. Known as a heavy drinker and party lover, he indulged in a reckless lifestyle filled with alcohol, drugs, and endless scandals. His dependency on cocaine, opiates, and excessive drinking began to erode his health and reputation. By the 1940s and 50s, Flynn's career declined as studios grew tired of his unpredictability. Once the most admired actor in Hollywood, he became infamous for his destructive habits. On October 14, 1959, Errol Flynn died at just 50 years old. The autopsy revealed years of heavy substance abuse had ravaged his body, leaving behind a legacy of both brilliance and tragedy. Billie Holiday, known as Lady Day, was one of the most soulful and influential jazz singers of all time. Her voice carried raw emotion, turning every song into a story of pain, love, and longing. Yet, behind her powerful performances was a woman fighting a relentless battle with addiction. Holiday grew up in poverty, faced racism throughout her career, and endured abusive relationships. To numb her suffering, she turned to heroin and alcohol, a dependency that became her undoing. In the 1940s, her arrests for drug possession made headlines, and the U.S. government even targeted her, determined to silence her voice after she released the haunting protest song Strange Fruit. Despite her talent, addiction and persecution overshadowed her brilliance. By the late 1950s, her health was failing. On July 17, 1959, Billie Holiday died at just 44, handcuffed to a hospital bed, her extraordinary life cut short by drugs and despair. Tallulah Bankhead was one of the most flamboyant and magnetic personalities of early Hollywood and Broadway. Known for her husky voice, sharp wit, and fearless presence, she captivated audiences in films like Lifeboat and dominated the stage with her bold charisma. But behind the glamour, Tallulah was battling demons that would haunt her career and personal life. Famous for her wild parties and scandalous behavior, she indulged heavily in cocaine, alcohol, and prescription pills. Her addictions, combined with her reckless lifestyle, made her notorious both on and off the stage. While her talent was undeniable, producers often found her difficult to work with, and her reputation for excess overshadowed her artistry. As years passed, her health deteriorated, and her once bright career faded into decline. In 1968, Tallulah Bankhead died at age 66, remembered not only for her brilliance, but also as a cautionary tale of Hollywood's destructive temptations. Dorothy Dandridge made history as the first black actress to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress, thanks to her stunning performance in Carmen Jones. She was elegant, talented, and groundbreaking, proving that Hollywood could not ignore her brilliance. Yet, while she broke barriers on screen, off-screen she faced relentless racism, limited opportunities, and constant rejection from an industry that refused to let her shine fully. The pressure of being a pioneer weighed heavily on her, and her personal life was marked by heartbreak, failed relationships, and financial struggles. To cope with her pain, Dorothy turned to antidepressants and alcohol, a combination that became increasingly destructive. On September 8, 1965, she was found dead in her apartment at just 42 years old, the victim of an overdose. Dandridge's tragic end remains a reminder of how Hollywood's prejudice and pressure crushed one of its brightest stars. Howard Hughes was once the embodiment of the American dream, a billionaire aviator, film producer, and business tycoon who seemed unstoppable. He dazzled the world with his daring aviation feats and his lavish Hollywood productions, living a life few could imagine. But behind his brilliance lay a deeply troubled man. After a series of plane crashes and injuries, Hughes began relying heavily on painkillers and codeine, eventually spiraling into severe addiction. His obsessive-compulsive disorder and crippling paranoia only grew worse, driving him into isolation. By the 1960s, Hughes had locked himself away in dark hotel rooms, surrounded by bottles of pills and relying on a small team of aides who enabled his habits. Once a bold innovator, he became a reclusive shadow of his former self. On April 5, 1976, Hughes died at 70, malnourished and frail, his genius consumed by drugs and self-destruction. Jean Harlow, the original blonde bombshell, lit up the screen in the 1930s with her beauty, charm, and magnetic screen presence. She was one of MGM's brightest stars, captivating audiences in films like Red Dust and Dinner at 8. But behind the glamour, Jean's life was plagued with personal struggles and health issues. Studio executives pushed her relentlessly, and like many stars of her era, she was exposed to a cocktail of medications meant to keep her working. Reports suggest she relied on drugs and alcohol to cope with the stress of fame and her failing health. By her late 20s, Harlow was suffering from severe kidney problems, which were worsened by the substances she used. On June 7, 1937, Hollywood was stunned when Jean Harlow died suddenly at just 26 years old. Her tragic end solidified her as an eternal icon, forever young, but gone far too soon. These stories remind us that behind fame and fortune lies a darker side of Hollywood. Addiction doesn't discriminate, it can take down legends just as easily as anyone else. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stardom for more untold stories of vintage Hollywood.